Why was everyone so quiet when she entered the briefing hall? Sarah could feel it before she saw it, the weight of judgment. The kind that didn't need words, just the brief glances that traveled from her uniform to her eyes, as if searching for proof she belonged there. The morning sun cast long shadows across the military compound, turning the dust motes into slow-falling sparks. It was early, barely 600, but the base was alive with motion. Boots striking pavement, metallic clicks of rifles being checked, low shouts echoing between barracks. She had been through mornings like this for years. But this one felt different. She knelt by her bunk, adjusting her combat boots with practiced precision. Every strap, every buckle tightened until it felt like part of her skin. The tension in her chest wasn't fear. It was focus, the calm before impact. At 26, Sergeant Sarah Martinez had already earned her place among the best in her unit. She had fought for it every inch. But today wasn't another test run or tactical exercise. Today was the day the SEALs arrived. Rumors had spread for weeks. They're sending Stone's unit. That name carried a gravity that even senior officers respected. Master Chief Derek Stone, legendary, decorated, the kind of man whose reputation preceded him like a marching drum. Every soldier knew the stories. Missions classified, outcomes impossible. Soldiers whispered that he'd walked through fire more than once and came out colder each time. The SEALs weren't just guests. They were the embodiment of every standard soldiers were told to live up to, but rarely met. And Sarah was on the list to train with them. That alone had stirred the barracks like a hornet's nest. "You sure you're ready for this, Martinez?" Staff Sergeant Williams' voice cut through the hum of activity as he passed her bunk, his tone balanced somewhere between doubt and warning. "These aren't regular soldiers. They eat people like us for breakfast." Sarah tightened the strap on her glove, her gaze rising to meet his. Her eyes, dark, calm, steady, didn't blink. "Then I hope they're hungry," she said softly. A few soldiers nearby chuckled, but the laughter didn't ease the tension. They had seen her train, seen her grit, her quiet precision. Still, there was something about this, about facing them, that drew invisible lines between who was accepted and who was tested. Outside, the base shifted as unmarked vehicles rolled through the gates. No insignia, no pomp, just presence. The SEALs stepped out, their movements synchronized like machinery. They didn't look around, they observed. Silent, assessing. They carried themselves with the certainty of men who had already done everything others only trained for. Sarah stood at attention as Commander Jackson called the troops into formation. The air buzzed with restrained energy as over 100 soldiers packed into the main training hall. Then he entered. Master Chief Derek Stone. 6'4", broad shoulders, eyes sharp enough to cut through noise. His posture alone commanded silence. Scars traced faint lines across his forearms, silent signatures of survival. He scanned the crowd, face unreadable, until his gaze found Sarah. It wasn't long, maybe 2 seconds, but the moment burned like a mark. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stone began, his voice calm but heavy with authority, "we're here to push you beyond what you believe your limits are. Some of you think you're ready because you've completed basic or maybe even combat tour. You're about to learn the difference between training and war." His words carried weight, not motivational, judgmental, the kind of truth that stripped people down. He let his eyes sweep across the assembly again. When they paused on Sarah, the silence deepened. "We don't lower standards," he said evenly. "Not for rank, not for experience, and not for any other factors." A few heads turned toward her, subtle, quick, but she noticed. Everyone did. She didn't move, didn't look away. "You faced worse than stares," she told herself. When the ceremony ended, the units divided into smaller groups. Fate, or perhaps deliberate intent, placed her directly under Stone's command for the week. No one said it aloud, but she felt it. The unspoken challenge. Let's see what she's really made of. The first exercise was an obstacle course, one she'd run more times than she could count. But this version was redesigned by SEALs. Harder, longer, built to crush endurance and patience at once. Stone's voice carried over the field. Course records 4 minutes 37 seconds, held by Petty Officer Johnson. Let's see how close any of you can get. One by one, soldiers ran. Dust kicked, bodies strained, and stopwatches ticked past 6, 7, 8 minutes. Respectable times, but no one came close to the record. When Sarah stepped to the starting line, murmurs rippled through the line. "Martinez," someone whispered, "you think she'll make it halfway?" Stone's tone was unreadable. "Don't hurt yourself trying to impress us. Sometimes knowing your limits is more important than exceeding them." The timer beeped. Sarah ran. She didn't explode off the line like some of the others. She moved cleanly, every step deliberate. Her breath synchronized with her rhythm, inhale on climb, exhale on drop. Mud, wire, walls, rope. Her smaller frame slid through narrow gaps where others had hesitated. Each obstacle became a calculated equation: weight, distance, velocity. Her mind ran the math while her body executed. Halfway through, she caught sight of Stone watching from the far platform, arms crossed, unreadable. That's when she felt it. The same fire that had followed her through boot camp when instructors said women didn't last. The same silence she endured when others doubted her place. When she crossed the finish line, the clock read 4:41. 4 seconds shy of the SEAL record. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then the silence broke: cheers, whistles, disbelief. Soldiers clapped her on the back. Some shouted her name. But Stone's expression didn't change. He approached, his shadow swallowing hers on the ground. "Impressive," he said, quietly, almost too quiet, "but the record still stands." She nodded once, not defensive, not proud, just steady. "Then I'll beat it tomorrow." He didn't answer, but there was something in his eyes now. Not mockery, calculation. The next morning came earlier than the first. 4:30. Cold air bit at her lungs as she stood in the gymnasium under fluorescent lights. Stone's voice carried over the low hum of tired soldiers. "Hand-to-hand combat training today. No weapons, no excuses." Thick mats covered the floor. The SEALs demonstrated, each movement crisp, precise, almost surgical. Watching them was like studying a language written in violence and control. Sarah mirrored their techniques quietly. Her mind mapped every motion, every pivot point where balance could be shifted with the right timing. "Pair up," Stone ordered. She found herself with Corporal Davis, a good soldier, broad-shouldered, cautious. Their practice went smoothly, fluid exchanges of strikes and blocks. But when Stone's boots stopped beside her mat, everything else fell away. "Martinez," he called. The room stilled. "Step forward." Her heartbeat slowed. She knew this feeling, eyes turning, silence sharpening. She'd been here before, the subject of skepticism disguised as demonstration. "Yes, Master Chief." He stood opposite her, taller, heavier, the gap between them almost cinematic in contrast. "You'll assist me in a demonstration," he said, voice steady. "We'll show how technique beats size." She understood what he meant, or what he thought he meant. They circled. Stone's first movements were textbook, clean defenses, measured counterstrikes as he narrated to the room. "See how I redirect momentum. It's about leverage, not power." The soldiers nodded, watching him effortlessly block her opening attacks. But Sarah felt something shift, his blocks growing sharper, more forceful, a touch of challenge creeping in. "Try harder, Martinez," he said, tone laced with quiet provocation. "Enemies won't hold back because you're smaller." And something inside her clicked. The demonstration became real. She moved faster, sharper, her training blending military efficiency with years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Krav Maga learned on her own time. Her strikes found openings, her balance shifted low and controlled. The room changed, conversation stopped. Stone's defense turned reactive now. He was no longer demonstrating, he was fighting. For several minutes, they moved in a blur of movement and controlled aggression. Each exchange carried more weight, more truth. The air filled with the sounds of bodies striking mats, boots sliding, breaths cutting through silence. Then suddenly, he called halt. They both froze, breathing hard. For a long second, neither spoke. Then Stone nodded once. "Excellent demonstration, Sergeant." She stepped back, pulse still pounding. But in his eyes, something new had taken root. Not dismissal, not disdain. Recognition. As the others resumed training, murmurs followed her. Words like, "Did you see that?" And she held her own. For the first time in years, Sarah felt the edge of something shifting, not just in the room, but in the system itself. Later, as she toweled off near the benches, Stone approached quietly. "You've had advanced training," he observed. "Yes, sir. Civilian programs, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Krav Maga boxing." His tone stayed even. "Tomorrow's exercises will be more advanced. Be ready." She met his gaze without hesitation. "I already am." He walked away, his boots echoing against the gym floor, and for the first time she sensed it clearly. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about something bigger. He wanted to know if she could survive the kind of test that didn't end when the training did. Outside, the dawn broke over the horizon, spilling gold over the compound. Sarah sat on the edge of the steps, tying her boot laces, breath misting in the cold air. She looked toward the gym doors, where the seal insignia hung like a shadow over the morning light. "They think they're testing me," she thought, "but they have no idea what I've already survived." And as the base came alive again, she rose, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward the next day. Quiet, ready, and burning with purpose. Why couldn't she sleep? The barracks were silent. Rows of beds stretched into the dark, broken only by the soft rhythm of soldiers breathing in their dreams. But Sarah lay awake, eyes tracing the ceiling panels that glowed faintly from the moonlight outside. Every sound, the ticking clock, a creak of floorboards, the distant hum of a generator, fed her thoughts instead of quieting them. She replayed the moment in the gym again and again. The feel of the mat under her palms, the resistance of Stone's arm as he tried to counter her, the way the air had shifted when she'd taken control for that single, undeniable second. It wasn't victory, it wasn't even defiance, it was truth. For one brief moment she had proven, if only to herself, that she belonged there. But the satisfaction came laced with unease, because she'd also seen the flicker in Stone's eyes before he'd called the halt. That tiny, measured look of someone who decided the next move would not be mercy. He wasn't done testing her. When the alarm blared at 4:30, she was already up, boots laced, uniform sharp, face washed in cold water to chase away fatigue. Outside, the dawn was a pale wash of gray-blue over the horizon. Soldiers moved sluggishly through the morning chill, but her steps were quick, precise, deliberate. Today would not be about running or climbing. Today would be about endurance and control. Master Chief Stone's voice rang through the gymnasium as the soldiers assembled. "Today we focus on hand-to-hand combat," he said. "When the bullets run dry and the rifles jam, your body becomes your only weapon." He looked over the group. The pause he took before continuing wasn't long, but long enough for her to know he was thinking of her. "Some of you believe strength wins fights. You're wrong. Control wins, awareness wins, discipline wins." The SEALs began demonstrating combat techniques, movements that blended efficiency with brutality. They didn't waste energy. Every motion had purpose. Every strike, every shift in weight, a language written in muscle and focus. Sarah watched like a student memorizing scripture. Her mind dissected their movements, absorbing everything she could, translating power into possibility. Then came practice. Pairs spread across the mat, each soldier facing an opponent of equal size and experience, except Sarah. Martinez, Stone called. Every head turned. Step forward. It happened just as she'd known it would. The silence, the quick, darting glances, the question everyone wanted to ask but didn't dare voice, is this fair? She moved to the center, her boots whispering against the mat. I want to demonstrate something, Stone said, his voice steady but edged with something colder. Combat isn't about strength, it's about technique, timing, mental toughness. He turned to her. You'll assist me. She gave a single nod. Yes, Master Chief. The circle closed around them, soldiers, SEALs, officers, all watching, some curious, some doubtful. He faced her, hands loose, stance relaxed, the giant versus the storm. Attack, he said simply. She moved. A fast sequence, strike, pivot, follow-up, grab, each motion exactly as they'd practiced. Stone deflected easily. The sound of their movement echoed through the gym. To anyone watching, it was another drill, another demonstration. But she could feel it shift. His blocks became harder, sharper, his counters faster. Try harder, he said quietly, almost under his breath. Show me what you've really got. Her heartbeat quickened. The air in the gym thickened. Soldiers stopped pretending to train, their attention locked on the mat. Sarah's focus narrowed. No audience, no noise, just him. She lunged again. Jab, low sweep, pivot. He blocked, countered, drove her back. The mat squeaked beneath their boots. Sweat stung her eyes, but she refused to break eye contact. He pressed forward, heavy and precise, testing her limits with every movement. Then instinct. She ducked, rolled, redirected his strike, and with a twist of leverage sent him momentarily off balance. Not down, but off rhythm, enough to draw a reaction from the watching soldiers. Stone froze mid-motion, his face unreadable. Then he straightened. Good. His tone was measured, but his eyes said more. Again. They continued for several more minutes, each pass growing tighter, faster, more dangerous. What had started as instruction had become a duel written in discipline and restraint. When Stone finally called the halt, her chest heaved with controlled breaths. The others were silent. Even the air seemed afraid to move. Excellent demonstration, he said evenly, stepping back. Take 15 minutes. But no one missed the way his gaze lingered on her when she turned to walk off the mat. Later, as she wiped sweat from her face, Stone approached. You've trained beyond standard issue, he said. Yes, Master Chief, she replied. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Krav Maga, boxing, civilian instruction. His nod was small but thoughtful. Tomorrow's session will push your endurance. Be ready. I always am, she said, meaning it. That night the barracks whispered with stories. Some said Stone had underestimated her. Others said she'd humiliated him. None of it was true, but rumors had a way of bending facts into legend, and by dawn, every soldier on base seemed to know her name. Day 3 began under low, overcast skies. Wind tugged at the flags above the compound as the SEALs set up the next phase of training, advanced weapons and tactical adaptability. The exercises were designed to simulate real combat conditions, broken weapons, limited ammo, unfamiliar terrain. In the field, Stone explained, your gear fails, your plans fail. The only thing that shouldn't fail is you. He looked at her again when he said that. Sarah's assignment, a simulated urban combat scenario using improvised and unfamiliar weapons. Her objective, neutralize multiple targets while minimizing collateral damage. The weapon they handed her felt heavy and alien in her hands, different trigger, different recoil. She studied it briefly, memorizing its rhythm. The buzzer sounded. She moved. Glass shattered as she entered through a mock window. The air inside was thick with training smoke. Targets appeared and vanished in the dim light. Her movements were quick, economical. She cleared corners with precision, her body flowing through the space like a current finding its path. Halfway through, she faced a split-second decision. A civilian target, non-combatant marker, stood near a hostile silhouette. She was under simulated fire. Every instinct screamed shoot. But she didn't. She shifted her angle, exhaled once, and fired a controlled burst that neutralized the threat without endangering the civilian mark. When the scenario ended, her accuracy scores ranked among the top 3. Her judgment flawless. Stone watched from the observation deck, arms folded, his face impassive. But when he approached afterward, his tone carried quiet respect. "Outstanding performance, Sergeant," he said. "Tactical decision-making under pressure, that's what separates survivors from statistics." She nodded, trying to mask the small tremor of pride that surged through her. But she could feel something unspoken forming between them, a current neither could name. Respect, challenge, recognition. That afternoon came team operations, complex hostage simulation, multiple actors, real-time communication. One mistake could compromise the entire run. Sarah's role, reconnaissance, move silently, gather intel, guide the team from the shadows. The operation began under the hum of radio chatter. She moved through the mock urban sprawl, every sense tuned to the environment. Her eyes mapped patterns of movement, enemy patrols, civilian routes. Her voice over comms was calm, steady, surgical. 2 hostiles northeast corridor, one armed with simulated rifle. Civilians present. Recommend flanking route through storage sector. Rodriguez, one of Stone's SEALs, responded instantly. "Copy that, recon, moving." The assault unfolded with precision. When it ended, the hostages were safe. 0 casualties. After the debrief, Rodriguez approached her, helmet under his arm. "That was textbook. Your recon saved us 3 minutes and a lot of simulated blood." Before she could respond, Stone's voice came from behind. "Agreed. Exceptional coordination. You think faster than most leaders I've seen." She turned slightly, meeting his gaze. There was something new there, subtle but unmistakable, not pity, not challenge. Trust. As the day ended, she sat alone on the steps outside the barracks, the sun bleeding into the horizon. Her hands trembled slightly from fatigue, her muscles sore. But her mind refused to rest. The whispers had changed now. No longer she doesn't belong. Now it was how far can she go? But even with the respect growing around her, something deeper stirred, a quiet fear she couldn't name. Because every compliment from Stone felt like another weight being placed on her shoulders. Every success was another reason for the next test to be harder. She could feel it, this wasn't over, it was escalating. And she wondered, not if she could win, but what it would cost her if she did. That night the wind swept softly through the base, carrying the scent of sand and engine oil. Sarah sat by her bunk, cleaning her rifle, the rhythmic motion calming her racing thoughts. Her reflection in the steel, tired eyes, set jaw looked like a stranger wearing her face. "They see what I can do," she thought, "but none of them see what it takes to stay this calm." Outside, the distant sound of a training explosion echoed through the valley, a reminder of what waited in the morning. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering to herself the mantra that had carried her through every storm. Control the moment, don't let it control you. And with that, she set her weapon aside, laid her head down, and let exhaustion finally pull her into uneasy sleep. Unaware that tomorrow, Stone would test her in ways no training manual could prepare for. Why did the training field look different that morning? The moment Sarah stepped outside, she felt it. The air was heavier. The usual order of the base had dissolved into something raw, unpredictable. Cones and ropes were gone. Instead, barriers, sandbags, mock buildings, and smoke canisters turned the compound into a living maze. Soldiers whispered rumors. Some said it was a surprise inspection. Others said Stone had requested something special. Whatever it wasn't in the schedule. Sarah adjusted her gear, scanning the horizon as the first light cracked over the ridge. The early air carried a faint chill, the kind that crept under armor and settled in your bones. When Stone's voice cut through the morning, it carried a tone she hadn't heard before. Lower, sharper, almost personal. Listen up. Real combat doesn't wait for orders. It doesn't follow rules. It doesn't care how good your uniform looks. He paced before the assembled soldiers, boots grinding against gravel. Your enemies won't announce their plans or give you time to think. They'll hit you when you're tired, hungry, or afraid. Today, we'll see who still performs when control is gone. Sarah's pulse quickened. The words felt aimed straight at her. He continued, we're running unscripted combat scenarios. No patterns, no warnings, you'll adapt or fail. The murmurs that followed were uneasy. Training without structure was chaos, but Stone wanted chaos. He wanted to strip them down to instinct. Groups were assigned, names shouted, orders barked. Sarah caught hers halfway through the list. Martinez Delta Group. Delta Group, the most difficult rotation, advanced scenarios, split-second decision-making, realistic stress immersion. She took a slow breath and stepped forward. The first scenario began before anyone was ready. Sirens blared suddenly. The field erupted in noise and confusion, shouts, simulated gunfire, smoke grenades filling the air with thick, acrid clouds. She ducked instinctively, her rifle rising to shoulder level, scanning through the haze. Voices crackled over radios, fragmented, overlapping, useless. Contact north. Civilian down no, wait simulation marker. She moved low and fast, her body reacting faster than her thoughts. The exercise was designed to disorient, to erase comfort, and it worked. Her team lost cohesion within minutes. Soldiers shouted conflicting orders. Half the group moved right while the other half stalled in cover. Sarah's instinct screamed for leadership, but protocol demanded she wait for a command. Then she saw it. A red flag marker, indicating mission-critical objective, fluttering through the smoke. The assigned team leader, a corporal already disoriented, hesitated. Sarah didn't. "Cover me," she shouted, sprinting toward it before anyone processed what she'd said. Bullets of compressed air cracked around her. She dove behind a barrier, exhaled, and returned fire in controlled bursts. Her world narrowed to rhythm and instinct. Move. Fire. Cover. Then a voice through the smoke, deep, steady. Martinez. Stone watching. His presence wasn't supposed to be part of the exercise, but there he was, silhouetted through the haze, arms folded, observing every decision she made. She ignored him, focused on the objective. One by one, her scattered teammates began to fall back into line. She directed them with calm precision, hand signals, short commands, clean coordination. Within minutes, what had started as chaos became motion with purpose. When the siren ended, silence rushed in like a vacuum. Stone stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Delta Group," he said, "one of 2 teams to complete the objective." Then his gaze settled on her. "Correction, Sergeant Martinez completed it, the rest followed." A few soldiers shifted uncomfortably. No one liked being called out by name, but even they knew it was true. He continued, voice carrying just enough edge to slice through pride. "That's leadership, not rank, not ego, initiative under pressure." Sarah held his gaze. She wasn't sure if it was praise or another setup. The next scenario began within minutes. No rest, no warning. The ground crew reconfigured the field, new sounds, new chaos. She was assigned to coordinate multiple small teams across different sectors while maintaining comms under simulated attack. It was a logistical nightmare, designed to break focus through sensory overload. Radio chatter screamed in her ear, conflicting reports blending with explosions in the distance. Team Bravo's pinned. Echo lost contact. Civilian marker down. Her heartbeat hammered against her ribs, but her mind remained strangely still. Control the moment. She started issuing calm, precise orders, not shouting, directing. Her voice, steady and sure, began cutting through the noise like a compass through fog. Her fingers moved over the radio console with methodical rhythm. Team Bravo, shift left. Echo, regroup by marker 2. Maintain suppression fire until Delta repositions. The simulation pushed her beyond exhaustion, forcing every neuron in her brain to make decisions faster than instinct should allow. By the end of the session, she could barely feel her hands. But she hadn't lost anyone. When the final buzzer sounded, she looked up to see Stone standing beside one of his men, both watching her in silence. He didn't clap, didn't smile, but there was a flicker of something behind his calm. Pride. After the debrief, she staggered out into the sunlight, her shirt clinging with sweat, her arms trembling from adrenaline withdrawal. Soldiers moved past her, muttering about how brutal the day had been. But amid the exhaustion, Sarah felt alive. Because every scenario had been designed to crush her, and she had endured. Still, something in her gut whispered this was only the prelude. That night, fatigue sank into her bones like lead. She sat alone in the mess hall long after everyone had gone, a cup of coffee untouched in front of her. The base was quiet, but her mind was. He's watching me, she thought, every move, every mistake, every breath. But she didn't resent it. In some strange, unsettling way, she understood it. Stone wasn't trying to humiliate her anymore. He was measuring her, testing how far she could go before she broke. The next morning brought no relief. New drills, harsher than before. Multi-team simulations, unpredictable objectives, shifting alliances. At one point, during a large-scale operation simulation, Sarah was forced to coordinate 3 separate units under a changing command structure. It was the kind of situation where communication breakdowns caused simulated deaths, fast. She made mistakes, missed cues, lost track of one team for nearly a minute, her frustration clawed at her chest like fire. But when Stone called for a halt, he didn't berate her. He simply walked up, eyes steady. "Why'd you hesitate?" "I was waiting for confirmation on the flank position." "And what did that cost you?" She swallowed hard. "Time." He nodded. "Exactly. Sometimes leadership isn't about waiting for clarity. It's about acting before you have it." For a moment, the room was silent except for her breathing. His words hit harder than any critique. "Understood, Master Chief." The next run, she didn't wait. She took command, cut through hesitation like a blade. When the scenario ended, the evaluators recorded the fastest completion time of the week. By noon, her body was running on fumes, muscles screaming, lungs raw. But the look on Stone's face told her everything. This wasn't about exhaustion. It was about endurance of the soul. During a break, she caught him speaking quietly with one of his men, Petty Officer Johnson. "She's not just holding up," Johnson said. "She's improving. Every round she gets sharper." Stone's reply was low, thoughtful. "Pressure reveals what people really are. Some collapse, some survive, and a rare few evolve." That night, she barely remembered walking back to the barracks. Her gear dropped in a heap by her bed, hands trembling as she unlaced her boots. The lights flickered softly overhead. She sat there in silence, sweat drying cold against her skin, staring at the wall. The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. The kind that stripped you bare, leaving only what you truly were underneath. And for the first time in days, she wondered, what if this wasn't just training? What if Stone was preparing her for something else? The next morning answered that question. They were gathered again in the main hall. Stone stood before them, posture sharp, voice even. "Tomorrow's exercise will be different," he said. "No teams, no simulations, direct assessment." He let the words hang for a moment before continuing. "One of you will face our highest standard, a one-on-one evaluation, real contact. Murmurs rippled through the group. Sarah felt the air shift around her. His eyes met hers across the room. "Martinez," he said quietly. It wasn't a request, it wasn't even a challenge, it was a statement. Every soldier turned. The silence pressed down like gravity. "Yes, Master Chief," she said, standing straighter. "Tomorrow," he continued, "you'll have the chance to prove everything you've learned this week, against me." No one spoke. Even the air conditioning hum seemed to stop. Stone turned to the others. "The rest of you will observe, dismissed." Sarah didn't move, didn't breathe. The meaning sank slowly, deeply. He wasn't testing her anymore. He was inviting her to the final level of his trust, his respect, and his scrutiny. As the soldiers filed out, the whispers began. "He's serious. She's fighting him." No one beat Stone. By the time she returned to her bunk, the whole base was already buzzing. She sat alone in the dark, her pulse a steady drumbeat in her ears. Tomorrow, in front of everyone. Her mind flickered with images of the past week. The mat, the gun range, the smoke, the exhaustion, the quiet nods of respect. And behind it all his voice. "Act before you have clarity." She exhaled slowly, lowering her head. "Then I'll act," she whispered to herself. Outside, the wind swept across the compound, carrying the smell of dust and metal through the open window. She didn't pray, she didn't hope. She just prepared. Because in the morning, she wouldn't just be fighting Derek Stone. She'd be fighting every assumption that had ever tried to define her. Why was the base so quiet that morning? It wasn't silence born of peace. It was the silence before something inevitable. The kind that creeps through corridors, finds its way under doors, and lives behind every whisper. Everyone knew what was coming. By dawn, the news had spread to every corner of the compound. Sergeant Sarah Martinez would face Master Chief Derek Stone, one-on-one. Some called it a demonstration, others called it an evaluation. But everyone knew what it really was, a test that could define careers or end them. Sarah didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, but because sleep would have meant losing control. She spent hours sitting at her bunk, hands clasped around a cup of coffee gone cold. Outside, the wind moved through the desert like a low breath. The base lights flickered against the darkness. She could hear faint laughter from the distant barracks, men trading theories about what would happen when the legendary SEAL leader stepped onto the mat against a woman half his size. She tried not to listen, but every voice felt like a ghost pressing against her thoughts. She looked down at her hands. The skin along her knuckles was still bruised from the last training day. Her body ached in small, forgotten places, but it wasn't pain she felt, it was anticipation. Stone's face kept flashing in her mind, the unshakable calm, the precision, the eyes that didn't miss anything. He's not just testing me anymore, she thought. He's testing what I represent. At 500, the lights came on across the compound. Engines hummed to life. Soldiers began to move. It was no ordinary training day. There was energy in the air, a pulse of curiosity and disbelief. When she walked toward the training hall, she could feel eyes follow her, some full of admiration, others of doubt, but no one was indifferent. By the time she arrived, the hall had transformed. The usual mats were gone, replaced with a wide central circle surrounded by tiered seating. Over 100 soldiers packed the room, infantry, officers, SEALs, instructors. The noise inside was a low hum, expectant, electric. At the center stood Master Chief Derek Stone. He wasn't wearing his usual fatigues, just a simple black training uniform. No insignia, no rank. Just a man ready to fight. When he looked at her, there was no arrogance in his expression, only intent. "Morning, Sergeant," he said evenly. "Morning, Master Chief. You understand the parameters of today's exercise?" "Yes, sir." No weapons, No scripts, full contact until submission or clear advantage. She nodded, understood. He studied her face for a moment, then spoke quietly, so only she could hear. This isn't about proving who's stronger. It's about proving what's possible. She met his gaze, then let's show them both. When he turned toward the audience, his tone shifted to command. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice resonating through the hall, for the past week, Sergeant Martinez has exceeded expectations in every discipline: marksmanship, strategy, leadership, endurance. Today, she faces her final assessment. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some leaned forward, others exchanged skeptical looks. Stone continued, "This is not a contest of ego. It's a test of control, composure, and technique under pressure. You will observe, you will learn, and you will not interfere." He looked back at her, ready. She exhaled slowly, "Always." The referee, a senior instructor, stepped back. The crowd hushed. Stone raised his hands. "Begin." The first few seconds were all movement and sound, boots shifting, breath sinking, the faint squeak of the mat. Stone struck first, testing her guard with a measured jab, more observation than attack. Sarah deflected, barely moving her feet. She didn't counter, not yet. The second strike came faster, then the third. He was probing her rhythm. She stayed calm, let him lead. Each block, each shift was information, data. To the onlookers, it looked like a slow dance, fluid, careful, almost rehearsed. But underneath it was calculation, each motion a promise of violence waiting to erupt. Stone stepped forward, closing the gap. His strikes grew sharper, his movements heavier. Sarah matched his pace, her body finding that familiar flow between instinct and discipline. She waited for the moment he overcommitted. He didn't. Minutes passed, neither gaining clear ground. The tension in the room thickened, pressing down on every breath. Then Stone's tempo changed. He lunged, not wild but decisive. A rapid combination of grapples and low strikes, meant to overwhelm through strength. Sarah blocked two, slipped one, and used his momentum to pivot. The crowd gasped when she forced him half a step back. Just one half step, but it mattered. He adjusted instantly, expression unreadable. She could feel the shift in energy, the unspoken respect, the understanding that she wasn't breaking. Not yet. Their movements grew sharper, faster. Sweat slicked the mat. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her breathing stayed measured. She heard distant voices, cheers, whispers, but they blurred into white noise. The world had narrowed to motion and muscle memory. At one point, Stone tried to sweep her leg, a move that should have taken her down, but her training kicked in. She twisted mid-fall, planted a hand, spun, and came back on her feet in one fluid motion. That was when something changed in the room. The murmurs stopped, the doubt faded. For the first time, everyone there understood she wasn't surviving by luck, she was fighting with precision. Stone adjusted again, his breathing steady. "You read patterns fast," he said under his breath. "You taught me to," she replied. He smiled slightly, then struck harder. The room exploded with movement, strikes, blocks, grapples, reversals. Each one sharper, heavier, closer to contact than before. Sarah felt pain bloom across her arm where one of his hits grazed her guard, but she didn't flinch. She absorbed it, redirected it. Then an opening. She stepped in, caught his arm, twisted at the elbow and shifted her weight, executing a near-perfect throw. He hit the mat hard. The sound echoed through the hall like thunder. Gasps, someone whispered, "No way." Stone rolled to his feet immediately. No anger, no hesitation, just renewed focus. "Not bad," he said quietly. She exhaled, not finished. The next exchange blurred into instinct. Her smaller frame moved with liquid precision, countering brute strength with leverage and timing. Stone's experience showed. He recovered faster, adapted to every pattern she built. He wasn't just fighting her body, he was studying her mind. But she had studied his too. His shoulders rolled before he attacked. His right hand flexed twice before striking. His stance widened slightly before a sweep. Small things, invisible unless you were looking for them. And she was. The next time he launched forward, she was ready. He threw a right hook meant to stun. She ducked, pivoted inside his guard, and drove her palm upward, directly into the exposed section of his torso below the ribcage. It wasn't power that made it hurt, it was precision. The impact forced a grunt from him, sharp and involuntary. He stumbled half a step before recovering. For a second, silence reigned. Then the crowd erupted. Not in cheers, yet but in shock. Because they'd seen it, they'd seen the impossible. Sarah Martinez had just made the unshakable Master Chief Derek Stone bend. Stone straightened slowly, his expression unreadable. Pain flickered in his eyes, but so did something else, pride. "You found it," he said under his breath. "Your weak point?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, your moment." He raised his hands again. "Finish it." The final sequence lasted less than 20 seconds. He lunged, she sidestepped. He pivoted, she countered. He went for a grapple, she slipped under and spun, leveraging her smaller size for speed. Her movements were pure instinct now, years of repetition distilled into motion that felt almost effortless. She saw the opening again, the smallest misalignment in his footing, and she took it. Her counter came fluid and final, an arcing movement that used his forward momentum against him. Stone went down hard. The thud echoed like a closing door. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then from the ground, Stone tapped twice against the mat. Tap, tap. Submission. The sound reverberated through the hall like a detonated truth. He rolled to his knees, breathing hard, and for a moment the entire hall remained suspended in silence. Then slowly, Stone rose and extended his hand. "Outstanding performance, Sergeant." Sarah stood there, heart pounding, staring at him. When she finally took his hand, the applause began, soft at first, then building, wave after wave, filling the hall with the sound of respect. In the crowd, someone shouted her name, then another and another. But she barely heard it. All she felt was the faint tremor in her hand as Stone's grip tightened, firm, deliberate. He leaned closer, voice low enough for her alone. "You've done what most don't even attempt," he said. "You didn't just fight me. You changed the way they see the fight itself." She swallowed hard. "I wasn't trying to prove anything." He smiled faintly. "Then that's why you did." As he stepped back, clutching his side where her strike had landed, she saw him wince, a flicker of pain across his face. He tried to hide it, but she noticed. Everyone did. And that's when the truth set in. She hadn't just survived. She broken the unbreakable. The whispers spread instantly through the crowd. Did she just? He tapped out. She broke him, she broke the chief. But Sarah didn't hear them. Her pulse was still thunder in her ears, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm of someone who had just crossed a line she could never go back from. She bowed her head once, out of respect, not victory, and walked off the mat in silence. Outside, the desert wind howled across the training compound, carrying sand and sunlight. Her shadow stretched long across the ground, merging with the horizon. Behind her, the hall still buzzed with disbelief. But she didn't look back. She didn't need to. Because she already knew, whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same again. Why was no one speaking? The hall was filled with over 100 soldiers, but you could have heard a pin drop. For a long moment, all anyone could do was stare. At the mat, at the space where Master Chief Derek Stone, the undefeated SEAL leader, had just tapped out, and at the woman who'd made him do it. Sarah Martinez stood motionless, chest rising and falling, eyes fixed on nothing. Her body still trembled with leftover adrenaline, but her face remained calm, too calm. The sound of Stone's hand, tapping against the mat, still echoed in her mind like a heartbeat. Tab, tab. 2 beats that would change everything. The silence broke, not with words but with motion. Stone rose slowly, his face pale but composed. His right hand pressed lightly against his ribs where her strike had landed. When he exhaled, it came out through his teeth, controlled, deliberate. Then he looked at her. For a second, no one else existed. He extended his hand. Outstanding performance, Sergeant. His tone wasn't ceremonial, it wasn't routine, it was real. She took it, her fingers firm around his. Their handshake lasted a second too long enough for her to feel the tremor in his grip. The crowd started to stir, whispers building into disbelief. She actually did it. Stone tapped out. Holy hell. The volume grew, overlapping voices like static. Then someone began to clap, one, then another, until the sound grew into thunder rolling through the hall. Applause, genuine, raw, uncertain applause. Sarah didn't smile, she didn't raise her hand. She simply nodded once and stepped back. Stone turned toward the crowd, jaw set, his authority still commanding even through the pain. That, he said, his voice hoarse but firm, is why we train. That's why we never underestimate anyone. The room went still again. He gave her one more look, something between pride and something heavier, something he didn't have a name for, then walked off the mat. Sarah followed, her heartbeat finally slowing as the murmurs chased her all the way to the exit. Outside, sunlight hit her face. It felt blinding. She stopped by the wall of the training hall, leaned against the concrete and let her head fall back. The sound of her own breathing filled her ears, sharp inhales, shaky exhales. Her body ached everywhere, her ribs burned, her wrists throbbed from overuse, but the pain felt distant, irrelevant. A few soldiers passed by, nodding respectfully, though they didn't know what to say. One young private muttered, "Ma'am, that was unreal." She gave a tired half-smile. "It was training," she said softly, "nothing more." But deep down she knew better. That wasn't training, that was a reckoning. By the time she reached the locker room, the whispers had already turned into legend. Did you see her move? She read him like a book. Stone didn't even see it coming. The story was already growing, reshaped by awe and exaggeration. Someone said she'd broken his ribs in one strike. Another said she'd knocked him unconscious before he tapped. Neither was true, but truth didn't matter. Stories traveled faster than reality. She sat on the bench, head bowed, staring at her hands, scarred, red, trembling slightly. What have I done? She didn't feel victorious, not really. If anything, she felt exposed. For years she'd trained in silence, fighting for small acknowledgments, earning every inch of respect in shadows. But now there was no hiding. The door creaked open. Stone. He moved slower than usual, one hand still pressed against his side. The faintest wince betrayed the pain he was trying to hide, but his expression, steady, composed, remained the same. "Sergeant," he said quietly. "Master Chief." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the ventilation filled the silence between them. Finally, he nodded toward the mat, burns on her knuckles. "You fought clean, efficient. That strike under the ribs, how long have you been training it?" "Since my second year," she said. "Reflex conditioning." He gave a low chuckle, wincing mid-laugh. "Remind me never to underestimate reflex conditioning." Despite herself, she smiled faintly. Then his tone shifted, softer, more reflective. "You understand what just happened out there?" "I think so." "No, you don't," he said gently. "You think this was about a fight. It was. That match wasn't for me, it was for everyone watching, for every soldier who's ever been told what they can't do." She looked at him then, really looked. His posture, the way he carried himself despite the pain, the honesty in his tone. "You weren't wrong to push me," she said. "I needed to know what I was capable of." He nodded. "And now you do." For a few moments, silence again. Then he reached into his pocket and handed her something small and worn. A metal insignia, old and scratched, the edges dulled from years of use. "My first team insignia," he said. "We used to carry them as reminders of the day we stopped being students." She hesitated. "Sir, I can't." "You can, you earned it." Her throat tightened. "Thank you." He gave a faint smile. "Don't thank me, just don't stop here." When he left the room, she sat in silence, staring at the small metal token in her hand. It wasn't shiny. It wasn't ceremonial, but it carried more weight than any metal she'd ever seen. The rumors spread like wildfire. By evening, every barracks, every mess hall, every corridor buzzed with the same story. Sergeant Martinez beat the SEAL leader. Some said it with disbelief, others with pride, but every voice carried the same tone, wonder. She walked through the base with a strange mixture of stares following her. Soldiers nodded. Some saluted out of respect. Others avoided eye contact. Recognition felt heavier than doubt ever had. Later that night, she was summoned to the command office. Colonel Williams, the base commander, waited behind his desk, reading a file. His eyes lifted as she entered. "At ease, Sergeant," he said. "Sit down." She obeyed, posture still crisp. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "I've heard the reports. Multiple witnesses confirm that you engaged Master Chief Stone in full contact combat and forced submission. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "Did you injure him?" "Possibly bruised ribs, sir. Nothing serious." Williams nodded slowly, expression unreadable. "Do you understand the magnitude of what that means?" "I do, sir." "I don't think you do," he said, leaning forward. "That man has never been defeated in training, not once. Not by his peers, not by officers, not by other SEALs. What you did today will echo far beyond this base." She shifted slightly, uncomfortable under his gaze. "It wasn't personal, sir. It was training." The colonel's expression softened. "That's exactly why it matters. You didn't fight him out of pride. You fought him because that's what soldiers do. They meet challenges head-on. That's why Command is requesting a full report." Her heart skipped. "Command?" "Yes, High Command," he clarified. "They want details, and they want to know who you are." The words landed heavy. "Sir, I—" He raised a hand. "Relax, Sergeant. This is a good thing. Master Chief Stone has already sent his recommendation. He called you one of the most capable soldiers he's ever trained. He's also suggested your candidacy for Special Operations Evaluation." Sarah froze. "Special Operations?" Williams nodded. "You've proven physical and tactical capability, but what impressed him most was your composure under pressure." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Every thought blurred into disbelief. "I'm honored, sir," she said finally, voice low. He leaned back, a faint smile on his lips. "You should be, but be ready. If you go down that path, the training will make this week look like a warm-up." "I understand, sir." When she left his office, the sky was dark, moonlight washing over the barracks and casting long shadows across the compound. Her footsteps echoed against the concrete as she walked, alone, insignia still in her hand. She paused by the training hall doors, looking through the glass at the empty mat inside. The spot where everything had changed. Her reflection stared back at her, calm, quiet, but not the same woman who'd stood there days ago. Behind her, a voice. "Couldn't sleep either." She turned. Stone leaned casually against the wall, one arm crossed, the other holding an ice pack against his ribs. She smiled softly. "Doesn't seem like you should be walking around." He shrugged. "I've had worse." "Sorry about the ribs." He chuckled. "Don't be, they'll heal. Pride takes longer." For the first time, she saw something in him that hadn't been there before. Humility, maybe even peace. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You did good today, Martinez. Better than you realize. But what comes next, it's not about fighting. It's about carrying what this meant." "What did it mean?" she asked quietly. He looked out toward the night horizon, where the wind stirred the flags. "It meant that limits are a myth," he said, "and sometimes it takes someone unexpected to prove it." He started to walk away, then paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "And Martinez?" "Yes, Master Chief." He gave a faint smile. "Next time, warn me before you decide to rearrange my ribs." She laughed quietly, really laughed for the first time all week. When he disappeared into the shadows, she turned back toward the training hall and let the laughter fade into silence. She looked down at the insignia again, the old metal warm in her palm. For years, she'd thought strength meant being seen. Now she understood. Real strength was being steady when the world finally did see you. She closed her hand around it and whispered to herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The wind moved softly across the compound, carrying those words into the night. And somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of 2 taps on the mat still lingered, reminding everyone who had witnessed them that change sometimes begins not with victory, but with silence. Why did victory feel so heavy? Weeks had passed since the match, yet the echo of it still hung in the air, in the way soldiers talked in half-whispers when she entered the mess hall, in the respectful nods from officers who'd never noticed her before. The fight was over, but the silence it left behind still spoke. Sarah Martinez had done the impossible. She stood toe-to-toe with the Master Chief, the man considered the living embodiment of discipline, and forced him to yield. But where others saw glory, she felt gravity. Every salute, every passing word of admiration, carried an unspoken weight. Now what? She didn't seek attention, she didn't crave recognition, but she couldn't escape it either. The story had grown beyond her. Some called her the woman who beat the seal. Others, the storm in silence. Even off-duty soldiers she'd never met would pause when she walked by, murmuring like witnesses to something mythical. She hated it. Not because she wasn't proud, but because they didn't understand what that moment had cost. The match wasn't a triumph, it was a truth. A truth that still lingered in her bones like static. The base had changed, too. Training sessions became sharper. The quiet tension that once divided soldiers between the old guard and the new began to ease. Because they'd all seen it. Strength wasn't defined by size or gender or expectation. It was defined by control. Master Chief Stone still ran drills every morning, but now his tone had shifted. Less dominance, more dialogue. He started integrating lessons from Sarah's match into training modules. Focus on anticipation, redirection, flow control. Some of the younger recruits noticed. "Feels different lately," one said during PT. "Yeah," another replied. "Feels like he's teaching us to think, not just fight." When Sarah overheard that, she didn't smile, but she felt something like quiet satisfaction. She earned that not through words, but through the way she'd moved on the mat. Sometimes dignity didn't speak, it simply acted. Her official reassignment came 3 weeks later. A letter stamped with the seal of the Department of Naval Special Warfare Command. Invitation to participate in special operations evaluation training. She stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside were the details: 3 months of advanced assessment held at a classified facility. Physical, mental, and moral endurance trials. Less about strength, more about survival under impossible odds. When she folded the letter back into its envelope, her pulse was steady. No fear, no excitement, just clarity. She trained her whole life for moments that demanded everything. This one would demand more. Later that evening, She found Stone in the training hall again, alone this time, working through slow, deliberate movements. Each one precise, efficient, the way only a man with decades of repetition could move. He paused when he saw her. "Sergeant." "Master Chief." "Come to spar again," he said lightly, but his tone carried something else, something proud. "Came to tell you something," she said, handing him the folded letter. He opened it, scanned the contents, and exhaled quietly. "So it begins," he murmured. "You knew this was coming." "I hoped it would," he said. "Command doesn't hand those out like candy. You didn't just impress me, you made a ripple in the system." She frowned slightly. "A ripple?" He nodded. "Sometimes it only takes one act to shift an entire culture. You proved that ability isn't limited by rank or background. You made them see potential where they'd stopped looking." She looked down at her boots, uncertain. "I didn't mean to start anything." He smiled faintly. "No one ever does. Change doesn't ask for permission. It just happens when someone refuses to stop." He set the letter aside, then met her gaze. "You ready for this next step?" "I don't know," she admitted honestly, "but I'll go anyway." He nodded. "That's the right answer." For a moment, the quiet between them felt like something sacred, the kind of silence shared by people who understood the cost of what they'd earned. Then he said softly, "Do me a favor when you're out there." "What's that?" "Don't fight to prove something. Fight to understand it." She tilted her head. "Understand what?" "What it takes to stay human when everything around you is." She didn't reply, but she would remember those words later, when exhaustion, fear, and doubt came for her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. 2 days later, she left the base. No ceremony, no send-off, just a silent departure before sunrise, duffel on her shoulder, wind brushing across the airstrip. Stone stood nearby, watching her load into the transport truck. He didn't say much. "Only this: they'll try to break you, Martinez. Let them. Then show them what rebuilt looks like." She nodded. "Yes, Master Chief." He extended his hand one last time. She shook it, firm and certain. "Fair warning," he said, voice calm. "Special Operations doesn't care about your past victories. Out there, everyone starts over." "Then I'll start better," she said. A flicker of pride crossed his face. "That's the spirit." As the truck door shut, she caught his reflection in the glass, standing still as the engine roared to life, his silhouette shrinking with distance. She didn't look back again. The new facility was different, remote, cold. Where her old base was filled with routine, this place felt alive with challenge. Every person she met carried a quiet intensity, eyes that spoke of things they'd seen, losses they'd carried. They didn't care who she was. They didn't care what story followed her. All that mattered was what she could endure. And she respected that. Because she didn't want to be the woman who defeated Stone forever. She wanted to be someone who kept earning it. The evaluation began on the third day. Physical conditioning first, brutal circuits, cold water immersion, sleep deprivation. She didn't outperform everyone. She didn't have to. She just never quit. Every time her body screamed to stop, she remembered Stone's words. Pressure reveals what people really are. Some collapse, some survive, and a rare few evolve. She repeated that line like prayer. When her legs buckled in the mud pit, she forced herself upright. When the instructors screamed inches from her face, she didn't blink. When others began to fail quietly, one by one she stayed. And though she didn't notice at first, some of the other recruits began following her lead, packing their breath with hers, matching her rhythm in the drills, drawing from her calm. Leadership wasn't something she declared. It was something that unfolded in the silence between heartbeats. By the second month, she was running on instinct. Every motion was survival. Every second was endurance. But even in that state, she found clarity, not in pride but in purpose. because the deeper she went into exhaustion, the more she understood something Stone had once said. It's not about winning, it's about lasting. Late one night, after a particularly grueling field test, she sat alone under the stars. The wind was colder there, sharp enough to bite through her uniform. She looked at her reflection in a puddle of water near the campfire. Her face was streaked with mud, her eyes hollowed by fatigue. But there was something else there too, stillness. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the small metal insignia Stone had given her, and turned it in her hand. It glinted faintly in the firelight, edges dull, but enduring. A symbol of something that couldn't be destroyed, not easily, not even under the weight of expectation. She closed her fist around it, pressing the cold metal into her palm until it hurt. That pain reminded her of who she was before the stories, before the crowd, before the applause. Just a soldier who'd been told she couldn't. And who decided to anyway. Back at the original base, Stone stood before a classroom full of new recruits. He played footage from the fight slowed down, frame by frame. "This," he said, pointing to the screen, "is what control looks like under pressure." The young soldiers watched silently, mesmerized by the precision of the movements. She didn't overpower her opponent, he continued. She outthought him. She waited for chaos and used it. A recruit raised his hand. "Sir, who is she?" Stone smiled faintly. "Someone who earned my respect." He paused the video. The frame frozen at the moment Sarah made contact, the strike under his ribs. Then he said quietly, "And someone who will go farther than I ever did." Back in the field, Sarah sat by the campfire, watching the embers glow red against the dark. She thought about all the moments that had led her there, the long silence of disbelief, the mat, the crowd, the tap. And in that stillness, she understood something she never had before. The fight with Stone had never been about victory. It had been about awakening. Because sometimes it takes being challenged by the best, not to defeat them, but to discover the best in yourself. She exhaled slowly, eyes lifting to the endless night. In the distance, faint thunder rolled across the hills, the kind that promised another storm. And she smiled softly, because she wasn't afraid of storms anymore. She'd already learned how to become one. Why did this final test feel different? It wasn't the exhaustion, that was familiar. It wasn't the cold, she'd learned to live with that. It was the silence. The kind of silence that meant something bigger was coming. By the time dawn stretched over the hills, the recruits had already gathered in the staging area, lined up in full gear, eyes hollowed by weeks of sleeplessness. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Everyone knew this was the end of the evaluation, the final test, the one that separated operators from applicants. No one knew what it would be. Sarah adjusted her rifle strap and looked around. 23 soldiers stood in that cold morning light, each of them changed, sharpened, and stripped of illusion. An instructor stepped forward. His uniform was clean, his tone clinical. "Today," he said, "you will participate in a live simulation, Operation Gray Veil. The objective is simple: infiltrate, secure, extract. Time limit, 3 hours. Success is based on coordination, discipline, and adherence to command protocol." A murmur rippled through the group. A field operation. Finally, something tangible. But Sarah caught something in his tone. Beneath the formality, there was something else: anticipation. The kind that made your gut twist. He continued, "This test will be monitored in real time. Every decision will be recorded. There will be no repeats, no warnings." Then he paused, eyes moving deliberately across the group before stopping on her. "Leadership will rotate. Sergeant Martinez, you'll lead the first phase." She felt every set of eyes shift toward her. "Yes, sir," she said, voice steady. "Your mission briefing is uploaded to your HUDs. You move in 10. And that was it. No encouragement, no explanation. Just silence again. They deployed by helicopter to a mock village built deep within the desert range, abandoned structures, broken roads, shadows painted long by the rising sun. The scenario was supposed to simulate a hostage recovery. But something about it felt too real, too detailed. Sarah reviewed the objective coordinates on her display. A civilian convoy had been ambushed. Survivors were reportedly hiding in a building near the center of the village. It sounded simple, and that worried her. They advanced through the sand, low and precise, weapons up, eyes scanning. The wind kicked up fine dust, blurring the horizon. Within minutes, they reached the perimeter, walls riddled with fake bullet holes, the air eerily still. Team 1 left flank, she whispered through comms. Team 2 right, stay low. Copy that. They moved like ghosts through the narrow alleys. Everything felt too quiet. Then the sound of distant gunfire. A sharp, echoing crack that sent every nerve in her body on edge. Contact, someone called over comms. Hold fire, Sarah ordered. Identify targets. Through the scope, she spotted movement, silhouettes emerging from a collapsed building. But something was off. The figures weren't armed the way the enemy in past drills had been. Their patterns didn't match. She zoomed in. Civilian markers. Her pulse jumped. Cease fire, cease fire. Too late. One of the recruits, panicking under pressure, squeezed around. The simulation sensors on the targets flashed red. The instructor's voice crackled through comms immediately. Rule breach. Civilian casualty confirmed. A heavy silence followed. Sarah closed her eyes for a brief second, then spoke low but firm. Who fired? Private Ellis, came the trembling response. She didn't shout, didn't curse. She just said, safety on, eyes open. We do not move until we assess. The voice of the instructor returned. Martinez, your command protocol allows you to remove liability. Recommend disciplinary elimination of the shooter and continue mission. Her stomach turned. Say again. You heard me, Sergeant. Candidate Ellis has violated live fire protocol. Eliminate liability and continue. She froze. The rest of the team looked at her, eyes wide. They all knew the simulation was being watched, evaluated. Every choice mattered. But this order, this wasn't about tactics. It was about obedience. She keyed her mic again, voice low. Sir, requesting clarification. This is a simulation. Then make the simulation real, came the reply. We measure reaction, not reasoning. Her pulse slowed. This wasn't a mission. It was a moral trap. She turned to Ellis, barely 20, shaking under his helmet. The kid's voice broke when he whispered, Ma'am, I didn't mean to. I know, she said softly. Her mind raced. If she disobeyed, she'd fail the test. Disobedience under command protocol meant immediate elimination from the program. But if she obeyed, she'd be crossing a line she could never uncross, even if it was only a simulation. Your decision, Sergeant, the instructor said. 30 seconds. Her throat tightened. The team watched her, waiting for the call that would define them all. She took a slow breath. Act before you have clarity. Stone's words. But not this time. Because clarity wasn't about orders. It was about conscience. She lowered her rifle. Negative control, she said firmly. We're not eliminating him. We'll proceed with the mission and correct the error as a unit. Static crackled, then silence. The comms went dead. She waited, no response. Command, do you copy? Nothing. Then the distant sound of rotors. The next phase had already begun. The rest of the mission ran like a dream through chaos, enemy ambush, shifting objectives, sudden blackouts. Every time they adapted, the scenario changed again. By the end, they'd lost half their simulated unit. They'd reached the extraction point late, exhausted, running on fumes. When the final signal sounded, simulation complete, none of them celebrated. They just collapsed where they stood, breathing hard, unsure if they'd passed or failed. Sarah stared at the dust swirling in the air, her body aching, her mind replaying that moment, the command, the choice, the silence that followed. She'd broken protocol, she knew it. But she'd protected her soldier. And somehow she felt right. Hours later, they were transported back to the facility. Everyone was silent, no one looked at her. They all knew what disobeying an instructor meant. When they were dismissed, a senior officer stepped forward. "Sergeant Martinez, command wants you in the review room." She stood, wiped the dust from her gloves, and followed. Inside, a row of monitors flickered with grainy footage, the simulation replayed from multiple angles. Instructors sat behind a long table, faces unreadable. At the center sat a man she didn't expect. Derek Stone. He was silent, hands clasped, watching the footage with that same calm intensity she remembered. Her pulse spiked, but she didn't show it. The lead evaluator spoke first. "Sergeant Martinez, during Operation Gray Veil, you disobeyed a direct instruction. Explain." She took a breath. "Sir, the order was unethical. It compromised both integrity and cohesion. My decision preserved the mission and morale." He raised an eyebrow. "So you admit to conscious insubordination?" "I admit to making a decision," she said evenly. "One I can stand by." Silence. Then Stone leaned forward, voice calm but cutting. "And what if that decision had cost lives?" She met his eyes. "Then I'd have lived with that too, but not with executing my own teammate for a mistake in a training sim." The evaluator shifted in his seat. "You understand what this means for your record?" "Yes, sir." Stone's gaze didn't waver. He looked at her as if weighing something invisible. Then he spoke quietly, almost to himself. "Still refuses the easy way," he said. "What's that, sir?" the evaluator asked. He turned slightly toward him. "The easy way is following without thinking. The hard way is leading with conscience." The evaluator frowned. "Are you suggesting approval?" Stone's expression didn't change. "I'm suggesting we acknowledge courage when we see it." Another officer chimed in, skeptical. "She disobeyed protocol." "And yet," Stone said, "her team survived, the others didn't." That silenced the room. He looked at her again, eyes steady, proud, restrained. "Sergeant," he said finally, "you didn't just pass the test, you redefined it." When she stepped out into the sunlight afterward, the wind hit her face, warm and clean. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the horizon. The sky looked endless. She thought about everything that had brought her here, the mat, the crowd, the fight, the silence after the tap. And now this. It wasn't about proving strength anymore. It was about earning trust. Behind her, a door opened, footsteps. Stone joined her, hands behind his back, posture relaxed. "Could have been easier, you know," he said quietly. "Doing what I was told." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, but you've never been good at that." "I learned from the best," she said. He chuckled. "Careful, that sounds like respect." "It is." For a moment they stood there, side by side, saying nothing. The wind carried the sound of distant engines, the faint hum of the bass returning to rhythm. "You know what that test was really for?" he asked finally. She looked at him, "To see if I'd follow orders." He shook his head, "To see if you'd follow yourself." Her gaze drifted back to the horizon. "So what happens now?" Stone exhaled slowly, a faint smile touching his face. "Now, Sergeant Martinez, you're one of us." She didn't answer right away, just let the words settle. The wind stirred her hair, brushing against the side of her face. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For seeing something before I did." He smiled. "That's leadership, seeing what's not obvious even in yourself." Then he turned, his shadow long in the fading light. "Welcome to the quiet side of history," he said. She watched him go, his steps slow but certain, until he disappeared into the glare of the sun. And for the first time in months, Sarah felt something rare, peace. Because she finally understood the lesson hidden behind every challenge, every bruise, every silence. Strength wasn't just in striking first. It was in knowing when not to. And sometimes the bravest thing a soldier could do was to refuse. Why did the desert look different this time? Because this wasn't training anymore. The wind smelled of dust and cordite. Heat shimmered above the sand, distorting everything beyond 50 yards. A convoy idled near a small ridge, armored transports painted dull gray, their engines humming like distant thunder. Sarah Martinez checked her gear one last time. Helmet secure, rifle clean, calm heartbeat. Across the convoy, her new team prepared in silence. Special Operations Task Unit 17. Hardened operators from across branches, quiet, efficient, eyes that had seen too much. No introductions, no small talk. Respect wasn't given here. It was earned in motion. Their objective sounded straightforward. Extract a captured engineer from a hostile zone. But every order, every movement carried the unspoken truth. Nothing about this mission would be simple. When the lieutenant in charge handed her the encrypted map slate, he said, "Your team 2, insertion from the West Ridge. Minimal comms, you know the drill." She nodded, scanning the map. The target compound lay 2 kilometers ahead, surrounded by dunes and silence. As she studied it, a familiar voice came through the headset, older, steadier. "Martinez." Her pulse quickened. "Stone." She hadn't heard his voice in months. "Didn't think I'd see your name on the roster," he said. "I didn't think you still monitored field ops." "Old habits," he replied. "I'm command liaison for this one. Don't worry, I'll stay out of your way." She smiled faintly. "You never really do." His tone softened. "Make sure you come back." "I plan to." "Good, then plan harder." The channel clicked off. She exhaled slowly, her focus sharpening like a blade. Insertion began at twilight. The helicopter's rotors tore through the fading light, throwing sand into violent spirals. Her squad dropped low, weapons tight, footsteps silent. The compound flickered ahead, lights dim, shadows moving behind cracked walls. 2 minutes, whispered Corporal Keene beside her. Sarah nodded. "Stay low, eyes on my signal." They approached through a collapsed culvert, the air thick with tension. Inside, every corner could hide an ambush, every doorway could breathe danger. At the breach point, she raised her hand. 3 fingers, 2, 1. Boom! The charge detonated, flash and dust exploding inward. They stormed the building, movement practiced and clean. First room clear, second, third. Then voices, muffled, panicked. They found the engineer bound in a corner, blindfolded but alive. Relief flickered for half a second. Then came the sound no soldier ever forgets, the pop-crack of distant gunfire. "Contact east." She spun, taking cover as rounds punched through the walls. The enemy had been waiting. Ambush. Her mind went quiet. That same stillness she'd found in the fight with Stone returned, calm within chaos. Keene, suppress fire, move the package out. Copy. Bullets shredded the plaster around them. Sarah shifted to a new angle, squeezing precise bursts through the breach. 2 targets dropped. Another ducked behind a vehicle. "Stone," she hissed into comms, "we're compromised. Requesting secondary extraction route." "Static." Then his voice, calm, measured, but laced with strain. "Your exit's blocked. Hold position. I'm rerouting air cover." She could hear distant chatter behind him. Command noise, frantic updates. "Negative," she said. "If we hold, we're pinned." "Then move west. There's a dry canal. Follow it 200 meters. It'll take you to the ridge." She signaled her team, "We're shifting west, go." They moved through collapsing corridors, carrying the engineer between them. Dust filled the air, smoke burned their throats. Every step felt heavier than the last. Outside, the canal stretched like a scar through the sand. They ran low, knees cutting through grit, hearts hammering. Behind them, explosions tore the compound apart. Then a new sound. A distant hum growing louder. "Drone inbound," Keane shouted. They dove for cover as the first missile hit, a shockwave lifting them off the ground. The blast swallowed sound itself, replaced by ringing, by heat, by dust. When Sarah opened her eyes, her helmet display flickered red warnings. Her ears roared. Keane was down, leg bleeding but alive. The engineer was motionless. She crawled to him, checked pulse, weak but there. Her radio crackled faintly. "Martinez, report." "Still here," she gasped. "Two wounded, we need extraction now." "Copy that," Stone replied. "Air support inbound, 3 minutes." "Three's too long," she said. "Then hold for 2.5. His voice steady, dry, that familiar iron calm grounded her. She gritted her teeth, adjusted position, and prepared to defend. The next minutes blurred into instinct. Enemy shapes advanced through the smoke, shadows flickering. Sarah fired in short, deliberate bursts, conserving ammo, calculating angles. Each movement was precision, control, breath, release. She remembered the mat, the rhythm of discipline, the lesson that control was stronger than fury. Her shots found their marks, 1, 2, 3. When her rifle clicked empty, she drew her sidearm, steady even as bullets tore sand inches from her head. Then the roar of engines above. 2 gunships swept low, their rotors flattening the air. Tracers ripped through the enemy line, turning the sandstorm into chaos. "Move," someone shouted over comms, Stone's voice again, urgent now. She slung the wounded over her shoulder and ran. Every muscle screamed. The weight wasn't just flesh, it was every decision she'd ever made pressing down at once. She reached the pickup zone as the helicopter touched down hard. A crewman reached out, hauling the casualties in. Sarah was last. She turned once, scanning the smoke-filled valley, making sure no one was left. Then she saw movement, a figure running through the haze toward them. Stone. He shouldn't have been there, but he was. He'd come to the field. He waved her forward, shouting over the blades, "Go." "Not without you," she yelled. He shook his head. "Get them home, Martinez." Another explosion ripped the ground between them, throwing debris into the air. When the smoke cleared, she saw him kneeling, one hand braced in the dirt, alive but pinned behind wreckage. She didn't hesitate. She jumped from the ramp, sprinted through the fire, and reached him just as another round of mortars landed nearby. He looked up, half smiling through blood and dust. "Didn't I tell you to follow orders?" "Since when do I start?" she shot back. Together they moved shoulder under shoulder, dragging toward the evac. The helicopter crew yelled, reaching out, pulling them inside as the craft lifted off. The desert dropped away beneath them, burning orange in the dying sun. For a long moment neither spoke, just breathing heavy and raw. Then Stone said quietly, "You always did overthink simple instructions." She laughed weakly, "And you always gave impossible ones." He smiled, the kind that said everything words couldn't. They returned to base after midnight. The wounded were rushed to medical. Stone refused the stretcher, insisting on walking under his own power. Sarah followed, limping, dusty, silent. Outside the hangar, he stopped, turning toward her. The floodlights cast long shadows between them. "You disobeyed me again," he said. "Twice, technically. And saved 3 lives doing it." She shrugged, "Old habits." He looked at her for a long time, eyes tired but proud. "You did good, Sergeant." She shook her head. "We all did." He nodded once. You led them. You kept your head when command lost theirs. That's rare. She wanted to answer, but her throat tightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded patch dark fabric with a silver emblem, the mark of their unit. Official now, he said, pressing it into her hand. Special Operations Task Unit 17. She stared at it. Feels heavy. It should, he replied. It's the weight of everyone who will follow you. For a long time, they stood there in the quiet hum of the flight line. Then he said softly, "You ever wonder why I pushed you so hard that first week?" "Every day." "Because I saw a fighter who didn't know she was one. You didn't need permission. You just needed proof." She looked up at him, eyes glassy. "And you gave it." He smiled. "No, you took it." He turned to leave, then paused. "Get some rest, Martinez. Tomorrow the real work starts." She watched him disappear into the hangar's glow, his silhouette fading into the noise of machinery and night. Hours later, she sat alone outside her quarters, the air cool, stars scattered across the black sky. Her hands rested on the patch lying in her lap. Next to it, the small, worn insignia he'd given her months ago. The two symbols, side by side, past and present, teacher and student, proof and purpose. She closed her eyes, hearing again the echo of those two quiet taps on the mat. Tap, tap. The moment everything changed. She remembered what he'd said back then, that this was never about proving strength but understanding it. And now she finally did. Strength wasn't dominance. It wasn't noise. It was the steady voice that guided others through chaos. She looked toward the horizon, faint light blooming there, a new dawn rising over the base. The sound of engines starting carried through the wind, another mission, another story waiting to be written. Sarah stood slowly, tucking both insignias into her vest. When she walked toward the hangar, her shadow stretched long across the tarmac, merging with the morning light. And in the quiet between one heartbeat and the next, she whispered the words that had become her truth. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The sun broke the horizon then, flooding the base in gold. And somewhere beyond that light, the legend of the woman who once shattered the SEAL leader's ribs began to fade, replaced by something greater. Not a myth, not a story, but a soldier still standing, still silent, still ready. Because strength, she realized, was never about being undefeated. It was about never needing to be.